when I read the entire list, I was like, I think I might have Asperger's. Welcome back to my channel and to part 2 of the story of how I found out I'm autistic and have ADHD. So if you haven't seen the first part, then I'm going to have it linked up in the corner here. Pretty sure that it's there, so that you can watch that video first and then you can come back and watch the second part so we get the whole story together as one. Okay, so let's just get right back into the story. So the last thing I talked about, I realized that I had Asperger's after reading an article by Dr. Tony Atwood about Asperger's in women and girls. And so I was in grade 8 at the time and I was 14. And this was right before my sister was having an exchange student come from France, and he was going to be staying with us for like a week, I think. I can't remember how long it was, but it wasn't very long. So because this was happening soon, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to keep this to myself for now, and then I'm going to talk to my mom about it later. So up until my sister's exchange student came and she was here and all of that, I was just I kept going back to this article and looking it over. I looked at other articles and every time I read it, I was like, yeah, like this is so me. I'm like, I have Asperger's, what? And like, I would like, yeah, I'm definitely gonna tell my mom after the exchange student leaves. Yeah, that never happened. Yeah, I think I just kind of chickened out because I was like, I don't know how she's gonna react about that. And like, I just, I think I overthought it. And so I just ended up abandoning that idea. And yeah, but things would still go how they needed to go. And so a few months later, my aunt was talking to my mom again, and she was saying how, how there's this like online little assessment thing where you can see if you have enough traits to have Asperger's or something, And so there was like a quiz that would give you a number, and if your number was like between or past a certain point, then like you could possibly have Asperger's. Yeah, so she sent the link to my mom, and my mom got me and my sister to do it. And so yeah, my sister did it first, and her number was like way below the score of like what it needed to be Asperger's. So it was like, okay, so now it's my turn to do it. I already knew what was going to happen. I'm like, this is going to say I have Asperger's because I already knew that because I saw that article and stuff. But I didn't say anything. I just did the quiz. And the number I got was actually a little bit lower than where it needed to be be like confirmed, like, ooh, you definitely have it. You should talk to your doctor or whatever. It was like really close. And so I think it was like that because I didn't understand all of the questions, and yeah, I didn't understand all the questions, so I probably didn't answer everything like how it actually is for me. So plus I think it was based a lot off of like men. So yeah. But anyways, I got like this number that was super close, and so everyone was like surprised and was like, oh wait, Rachel might have Asperger's, what? And I was like, yeah, I already knew that, but I didn't say that out loud, of course. So I don't really remember the timeline specifically, but in the next couple of like months or so, me and my mom, we actually ended up talking to my doctor about it. So I don't remember why, but I don't know, me and my sister, we got blood tests. And so when the results came back from my blood test, we like went to the doctors to go check it out and stuff. So while we were there, my mom decided to, talk to my doctor about like, oh, like we think Rachel might have Asperger's, like what do we do from here, So so I thought that I'd go in there and like that I would be like, getting ready to get like a test for Asperger's soon. Like I was like, okay, cool, this is happening. Like what? Yeah, that visit to the doctor literally went nowhere. So my doctor gave us the results for the blood test, and then my mom was like, "Oh, so we want to see if Rachel has Asperger's. Like, we think she might have Asperger's, something like that." My doctor was like, "You can't find that out from a blood test." It's like, yeah, we know that. That's not why we're asking. That's not what we're asking you. Like, we want to have a test for Asperger's, like a diagnosis or whatever. Then she asked me like, I don't even know. It was just so stupid. Anyways, so then she started asking me some questions. She literally asked me two questions. She asked me how I was doing in school, like if I was getting good grades, and I was like, yeah. And then she asked me if I had friends, and I was like, yeah, because at that point I was hanging out with that group of girls that had invited me into their friend group, which I talked about in my last video. And so she was like, "Well, you seem to be doing fine, so you don't need an Asperger's test." I was like, "What the heck?" That was literally the most, it wasn't the most, but it was very frustrating. That was like the most frustrating thing ever, because she literally asked me two questions like, "You don't need an Asperger test, you're doing fine." Like, what? Just because I'm doing well in school and I have friends? She didn't ask me how I made those friends. She didn't ask me if I had trouble making friends. She didn't ask me anything. She asked me two questions. Like, what the heck? According to my doctor, I can have Asperger's because I had friends and I was doing well in school. So yeah, that was a very disappointing day. So after that, I went through the rest of middle school and I went on to high school undiagnosed, but still knowing that I was different somehow. So when I was 16, my family moved to Silicon Valley in California, which was a very big change for me. This time when we moved, I was more realistic. I had a more realistic idea of how making friends might go. It was a really big move and a really big change. My time in California in high school was very stressful. It's a lot more competitive out there, and so like pretty much from like the first week of school, I was like feeling that stress. I'm like, oh, like these people are like on another level from what they were in Canada. So I'm like, okay, like this is stressful. But yeah, fortunately for me, I had managed to make some friends. Again, not because I did anything, but because people came and talked to me. So yeah, and this time, it was more clear about what I had to do next. They invited me, or like I went to the same place where they were and we talked and we became friends that way. So it was better on the friend aspect, I guess, than middle school. Yeah, so I spent my junior year and my senior year in high school in California. So my junior year it went pretty well. I only had one class that was super stressful, but everything else was all right. So I was like, okay, cool. This isn't so bad. I can get through this. Yeah. My senior year was a lot more stressful. At that point, I was taking two AP classes. And so it was like I had like two college level classes plus other high school classes. And I was applying for like universities and like colleges, and I was trying to figure out like where I wanted to apply, and then I had to do the college essay thing and the SATs, and yeah, and like figuring out like what I want to do for the rest of my life. It was very stressful, and I got overwhelmed very quickly. So of course I had an anxiety attack one day, and my parents became concerned about me. Once again, Asperger's came back on the table. At this point, it was like 2016, so the DSM 5 was like installed and stuff, and like, so Asperger's wasn't a thing anymore, and it was all just autism. So once again, we tried to get a diagnosis for me, and my mom did a lot of work, like calling different places, different like psychologist places, to try and see if they had an opening for like doing a diagnosis and stuff. And we were able to find somebody. So I did all the tests that she gave me, and my parents filled out like a whole thing, and I also had to have a teacher fill out a thing. And yeah, it was like a whole thing. Unfortunately, that also went nowhere. Yeah, it didn't give the results that I needed. So the person that assessed me obviously didn't know a lot about autism. They also didn't know anything about autism in females. And I know this because on the day where she was giving me my diagnosis, and after she like analyzed all the stuff and whatever, she was like, "Oh, I don't remember what she said, but basically she said like because of me, she like learned a lot about like girls on the spectrum, and like she didn't know that it was like different for girls than it was for boys or stuff like that." And she had this whole article about like autism in girls or whatever that she gave us. And so I thought that this was going to be like a good result. I was like, okay, so that means that I have autism, like I'm autistic, right? Nope. She gave me a diagnosis of social pragmatic communication disorder. That was a very disappointing day for me as well. The thing that gets me to this day, whenever I think about this, I just get so agitated. It's because she literally said these words. She said that if this was the DSM 4, I would have been diagnosed with Asperger's. But she gave me a diagnosis of social pragmatic communication disorder. The DSM 5 literally says that people who are diagnosed with Asperger's or with pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified, whatever, people with those diagnoses are now classified as autism because it's all autism. It's all on the autism spectrum, which is why it's called autism spectrum disorder, right? So why, if the DSM-5 literally says that Asperger's is now autism, why would you say that why would you say that I would be diagnosed with Asperger's and yet not give me a diagnosis of autism? That doesn't make any sense. That literally makes no sense. I know that she probably thought that she was helping me out by not giving me a diagnosis of autism because she's like, oh, it's, she's going to be held back and all of this stuff, whatever. But by not giving me the correct diagnosis, it didn't help me out at all. So, I graduated high school and I went on to university again, undiagnosed. Well, this time misdiagnosed. The reason I can say confidently that I am misdiagnosed with social pragmatic communication disorder is because that social pragmatic communication disorder only describes one aspect, it only describes one thing that I experience, and I experience a lot more things than one. It just it only explains my difficulties with social communication. It doesn't explain sensory issues. It doesn't explain special interests. It doesn't explain like fidgeting or stimming. It doesn't explain any of the ADHD symptoms that I have, like not following through on things and um, man, I forget. Being forgetful, getting easily distracted, disorganized, like not being able to organize my time properly, you know, all of the things. Doesn't explain any of that. Only explains my difficulties with social communications, but nothing else. That's why I can say that it's wrong, because it doesn't explain anything except for one thing. So, anyways, after that diagnosis, I was like, you know what? I don't care what that lady said. I'm autistic. And so I went off to university and I was like, I'm going to live my best autistic life. I actually, I put that in the script and then I took it out, but I said it anyways. I had watched a lot of videos of autistic women and girls on YouTube. And so like, I related to like so many of the things that they said. And so like, I was 100% sure that I was autistic when I went to university. Like, I'm like, yeah, I am. Like, this lady just didn't know what she was talking about. Like, I know that I am. And so in university, I joined an autism awareness club and I learned about an adult autistic like group, I guess, in the community. I went to the meeting and I was like, wow, I really so much of the things you're talking about, things that I experienced, and I'm like, this is so great. But that's not the end of the story. I was very sure that I was autistic, and nobody could have convinced me otherwise except for myself. I had gone to one of those meetings with the of autistic adults, and it was great. The first meeting was great, and then I went to a second meeting where it was like they were having like a holiday party, and I just got completely overwhelmed. There was a lot more people there, and like everybody was different. And the one thing that I didn't fully understand, I guess, at that point was that autism is a spectrum, which means that everybody looks different. I guess at that time, I still thought that autism was a linear spectrum, and I didn't realize that it was a like circle spectrum. And so I thought that it was like you can be more autistic or less autistic, which is like not it's not a thing. X on that. That's not how it works. It's a circle spectrum, so you either are autistic or you're not autistic. And people who are autistic look different than each other, and they're not all gonna look the same. And I didn't really fully understand that. So when I went to that holiday party, there was like everybody was different, and like there were people who were talkative and people who weren't talkative and people who were like doing things, and everybody was like, I don't think anyone was really masking either. So like everybody was like being their full autistic selves, and I was like still a little masking 18-year-old at that point. So I was like, I'm nothing like these people, and I got really overwhelmed. And so I never went back to that group because I was like, I can't be autistic. I'm nothing like these people. To be fair, most of the people in that group were white and a lot older than me. And so, of course, I would have not been anything like them, anyways, to begin with. But I was like convinced that I couldn't be autistic because I was nothing like these older white autistic adults, while I was a young adult, a young black autistic girl, woman. I don't know, whatever. I was 18. Like, why would I be anything like them to begin with? And so, yeah. And also the fact that I didn't have an official diagnosis as autism also made me feel like some sort of an imposter. And so I was like, I just convinced myself that I could not be autistic because I was like, well, I don't have the diagnosis. I'm nothing like these people. That can't be me. I don't know. So, yeah, I kind of went back and forth on this pretty much for the entirety of my university experience. Um, yeah, I kept going back and forth like, maybe I am, maybe I'm not. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. No, I can't be. I'm definitely not. No, maybe I am, but no, I'm not. So yeah, it was basically like that up until the pandemic. Yeah, the pandemic made things a lot more apparent for me because I struggled a lot with my mental health, especially during like the start of the pandemic. I was really struggling with stress and stuff, like stress and burnout and anxiety way before the pandemic because I was a undiagnosed black young adult in university pretending to be neurotypical, so of course I was going to be stressed out, of course I was going to get burnt out, and of course I was going to experience anxiety. It was a recipe for disaster, to be honest. But the good thing is I graduated, so it wasn't a total disaster. Anyways, during the pandemic, all of my stress and anxiety got a lot worse. And so, I had a few panic attacks, or not panic attacks, I had a few anxiety attacks. I had a meltdown. I was going to quit school. And so, I talked to a counselor and, we talked a lot about changing thoughts and deep breaths and all the things that you talk about with a counselor who is trying to treat anxiety. And, it helped a little bit, but I still felt like there was something else, like how I had felt that long time ago in middle school. It felt like I was treating symptoms and not getting to the root of the problem, which was that I am an undiagnosed autistic person and also have ADHD, but I didn't know that at the point. So in around around February of this year, I saw a video by Paige Layle, and she was talking about her childhood traits. Actually, that's a lie. The first video I saw of Paige Layle was a video about her talking about how she was dropping out of school. And I was like, I was like, I wanted to drop out of school. So I watched that video and she said that she's autistic. And I was like, wait, she's autistic? So then she had another video about how she was about her childhood traits. And so then I watched that video and I was like, I relate to a lot of the things that she's saying. Like, wait, what? But then, well, I mean, it wasn't really that much of a surprise because I knew deep down, I knew that I was autistic, but I was like, I kept going back and forth on it. But when I saw those videos, I was like, I'm like, this is me for sure. And so I watched some more videos again of more autistic women talking about their diagnosis stories and their childhood traits and stuff like that. And I was like, the more I watched, the more I was like, yeah, I'm like, this is me. Like, this is definitely me. So I looked at the diagnostic criteria for autism again, and at this point I understood things a lot better because I was majoring in psychology, so a lot of these things I studied in school, and so I understood things better. I understood what anxiety really was. I understood the things that I was experiencing better. And so I could look at the diagnostic criteria and be like, yeah, wait, I experienced this, I experienced this, I experienced this, you know? And so I was like, yeah, I'm like, I'm definitely autistic. Like, this is me. I'm like, I need to get a diagnosis. The way I found out that I also have ADHD is also from one of Paige Layle's video where she was doing a Q&A, I think, with her friend who has ADHD. And Paige also has ADHD. She's autistic and has ADHD. So, yeah. But yeah, so I remember I was watching the video and I was like, wait, I relate to like things that like you're both saying right now. And I remember they were talking about how um they tend to like jump from like interest to interest and like they never like stay on like one thing for a long time. And I was like, that's me. Like, that's really me. Like, that's really me. Like, I can give you an example of me and sports. I had never done anything consistently. I went from soccer to basketball to track to figure skating, back to track to just general fitness to nothing. Basically, I'm like always going from one thing to the next, and that's like an ADHD thing. And I was like, wait, do I also have ADHD? So then I looked up ADHD. I did the same thing that I did with autism. I looked up ADHD, I watched videos, I read about it, I looked at diagnostic criteria, and I was like, I think I have ADHD as well. That's kind of how I figured out that I'm both autistic and have ADHD. Yeah, that brings us to the present, which is now. And I am self-diagnosed to these things. I will say that I'm autistic and I have ADHD. I don't have an official diagnosis, but I am hoping to get one. I just need to, get a doctor and figure that out. But when I do get that going, I am definitely gonna film it for sure. Now I know why I am the way that I am. I know why I struggled so much in middle school making friends. I know why I did so many random things when I was a child. I understand myself better and it feels good. It feels good to understand why you do things the way you do things. I no longer, well, I'm learning to recognize that I'm not lazy or I'm not weird or I'm not just shy, but I'm autistic and I have ADHD, and there are certain things that I struggle with that neurotypical people don't even have to think about. And that's my life, and that's who I am, and that's who I'll always be. So that's it for my story time, I guess, of how I found out that I'm autistic and have ADHD. For some reason, I feel like this second half of the video, this story was probably a lot longer than the first one, but if you stuck around for this long, thumbs up to you. So that brings us to the end of this video. If you liked it and you found this like helpful, or I don't know, if you related to a lot of things that I said, then give it a thumbs up so that I know that people like this. And also, if you have anything you want to say, if you have any questions or comments, then comment them down below so that we can all see what you have to say, because it's nice to see comments. And finally, if you like my videos, then please subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you know when I post my next video. So as always, stay ritualistic, or whatever your name is, istic. And I'll see you next time. Bye.